Oh, we are back. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Eline Podcast. I am your host, Mark Rose, with Ellie and Rebecca, and we're just going to chat today. We're going to talk about life, what's going on with everyone, and yeah, go from there. So, how's everybody doing today?
I, for one, am doing very well today. My boyfriend and I got some exciting news, and I'm just feeling really positive and looking forward to the future.
Well,
Good, yeah.
I'm excited to hear about that. You're definitely going to have to share that exciting news with us.
I will.
Ellie, how are you today?
I'm doing well. It's been a really chill weekend, working 9 to 5 throughout the week, and being able to chill on the weekend is an honor. It really is. So,
Yes. It's an honor just going through like daily life and working and then
yeah.
the weekend of
Coming
just
from a space when I wasn't working, so it is what it is. But the journey of an entrepreneur,
yeah, it's a journey. It's a journey for sure. So Rebecca, what all did you do this weekend?
So Friday evening, I'll preface by saying my boyfriend and I have lived on a sailboat for the past 2 years. And we recently sold our sailboat because we wanted to move on to a bigger boat. It was an older project boat. We worked our absolute asses off on it. And yeah, just really put our heart and soul into her for like 18 months. Um, Took longer than we anticipated, but we ended up selling her to a really good guy. And so now he's enjoying her on his adventure. And so this past weekend, well, for the past couple of months, we've been around, looking at boats. We've gone and looked at some in Florida and in North Carolina, and here in South Carolina as well, where I am now. Uh, and yeah, it's a bit of a journey because most of the time when you hear about people buying any boat, but especially like a boat big enough to live on, you think like, oh, they must be loaded. But that's not where we're at. We are very lucky and blessed, and at the same time, we're just making this work with the small amount of money that we have to make it work on, which isn't the easiest thing. And, there's a lot of work that's going to be involved. But we went to Virginia this past weekend and found a boat on the Chesapeake Bay that we really, really adore and had so many things that we just really loved about her. And the owner was just so kind. And it's always cool to meet people like that who are just like genuine, good people, and yeah, it just really felt like the right thing. So yesterday evening, we got back home, we officially put in an offer, and then today we got an email back saying that it was accepted. So we still haven't officially got a boat, but um, we think that all the inspections and everything will go perfectly fine. So really excited about that.
Congrats, congrats, congrats.
all right, I love that. So I think I knew you were living on a boat or like exploring on the boat. I kind of looked at it like, I know a couple of YouTubers that have done that and they just don't stay out of their van. And I look at it as like romanticizing life. I love that. So like, what has it been like on a daily basis? Like, I'm I'm not motion. I don't think I have motion sickness like that, so I don't think I have a problem with that at all. But like, what is it like to wake up and go to sleep on the boat? I mean, I'm assuming it's always going to be like a good chill atmosphere in a sense of like the air quality is really good there on the boat.
Yes.
Okay, and like, where do y'all sell to certain destination points? Like, what's that like? Are y'all really just traveling the world or traveling coast to coast? How are you doing this?
So we haven't ventured too far. I'd say the longest journey that we took on the sailboat was like 19 hours, which, when you're in a car, you can kind of, we've come really far when it comes to like interstates and things like that. We can get where we want to go pretty dang quickly. But when you're on a boat, it especially a sailboat, they tend to be a lot slower than power boats, which is what we're looking to get now. But we took one really long trip, which was from Savannah, Georgia, down to just north of Florida. And it was crazy. Like, it was one of the most intense things that I've ever been through, just being in the middle of the ocean at night, and it was on a new moon as well. And so there was nobody out there except for like a couple of shrimp boats. And yeah, just like you and nothing else. Just you, me, and my boyfriend, of course, and our two dogs who got so seasick, the poor things. Um, and yeah, it's pretty crazy. I don't get seasick unless the sea state is really intense. But yeah, when we're falling asleep at night on the boat, there is a little bit of a rocking, and the wind will blow, and to me, I find that really relaxing. Some people absolutely hate it. Everyone's different. But yeah, I love what you said about romanticizing life, because that's really what I aim to do on a daily basis, and I definitely fall short. But to me, yeah, it's just really, really a beautiful way to live, because like you said, the air is fresh, you can smell the salty breeze all the time. And yeah, when I come back inland, it is nice to like have a dishwasher, when we're staying with family, and have a washer and dryer, and all the conveniences that a lot of us are used to having on a daily basis. But to me, the sunsets are worth it. The sunrises are worth it.
I
The
bet.
Yeah, I just feel that way.
So did you always like water growing up?
I always loved water. When my family and I would go to the beach, I would just be in the ocean like as long as I possibly could. And I grew up, South Carolina, Midlands, went fishing with my dad all the time on, you know, a little boat. We would go out, and I've just always loved it. I love water of any kind.
Aw.
No, I'm sorry. I love the answer. It's not you, it's him. Like the question. Sorry.
Oh, do you like water? Oh, no,
Like
because
the question itself, if you think about it, it's like, well, we are water. And like
no, you're right. Yes. No, it's like okay, because Rebecca was talking. You're so
okay, I'm sorry. We could just keep going because I wasn't ready for that. But I love the answer. I know you got this into what you said. I understood what you're saying, but it just caught me off guard.
No, I mean, I am a hydrated girl as well.
Yeah, no, I was just asking like the beaches, this, that, and the third, because a lot of people like, if you're gonna be sailing, on a boat for a living and everything like that, I didn't know if it was something to where like you just within like the last recent, few experiences of life to where you're like, oh, cool, this is cool. And then you mentioned like your boyfriend, so I didn't know if it was something that, let's say maybe he was into more than you got introduced, or you introduced him.
Mm.
And speaking about that, like how long have you been with your boyfriend?
So it'll be 3 years in June. So almost 3 years.
Do
Oh,
okay,
happy
so
anniversary.
so how long has he had like the boat? Who has had the boat first? How did this come apart with like sailing together, being on a boat? How did this come like apart?
So before I met Tim, I had never really considered living on a boat. I hadn't even really come across any YouTube channels of like people who lived on boats or anything like that. But I was a minimalist, and just sort of like the more, because I am very young, I'm 23, and so I'd only lived on my own. I mean, I moved out when I was 17, so I lived on my own for a few years, but there's still always new things that we're uncovering about ourselves. So I knew I loved the water. I knew I wanted to be a minimalist. Um, but in my mind, all I had heard about were like tiny homes. And I was like, oh, that would be really amazing to like have a tiny home. And then just like I was thinking about building one myself. And then Tim came along, and he is retired Navy. So, and he is much older than I am as well. So I'm 23 and Tim is 56. So we have 33 years between us. So we have sort of an interesting story of how we met and just, yeah. So we met and he told me from the get-go, like, I want to buy a boat and live on the water. And I thought it was the coolest thing ever. And so at the time, he was living in Atlanta, Georgia, and I was living in Columbia, South Carolina. And um, he and I went to go look at sailboats because he just decided, like after COVID had hit, because this is in 2020, after COVID had hit, he was like, you know, I don't want to work this corporate job anymore. I want to be able to be mobile. There's lots of remote jobs that are coming up. He's a network engineer. And he was like, I'm just going to trust that it'll work out. And so he retired extremely early from his company and took out his retirement money and bought a sailboat. And it took a very long time for him to find the right remote job for us, but eventually he did. And yeah, we moved on to the boat about 2 years ago, and then we spent 18 months just doing a lot of work to her because she was a 1979. And so there were a lot of things that needed updating and just needed like general care and love. It's a pretty harsh environment with all the salt water and the storms that come through. And so there are always things that you can fiddle with on a boat. And yeah, so she was only 34 feet long and very small. But I look back at those days that at the time may have seemed like mundane or just like, this is just the way that we live and it's very simple. We cook a lot of our own food and we didn't have hot water. And so we were, just going without, we just had cold water and just everything was very small. And of course, there are challenges that come with that. But when I look back at those days, it's just so nice. Like, it's because when there's not as much around, at least for me, it's easier to focus on what's really important. And what's really important is like us spending time together, the other people that we're meeting who are like coming through on their boats and the stories that they have to share. And a lot of those people were a lot more badass than me and had been on longer journeys and like circumnavigated the world. And yeah, it just really opened my eyes a lot.
That's beautiful. I love that. One of my favorite movies is Eat, Pray, Love. And she when she was traveling over to Italy, she learned this term, she said dolce finite, which is the sweetness of doing nothing. I have it tatted somewhere on me too. But I just think that you're living that for me. I think that's beautiful. I love that. Because you don't need all that. You don't need hot water every day of your life. You don't simplifying and minimalism is definitely a thing that we're both into, Mark and I feel like it's just a way of life. Like, why would you want the clutter? And I feel like a lot of Generation Z, is pretty good about keeping things simple. So I have a question when it comes to like the relationship being so different and how you find common ground. Like, how do you guys find common ground on anything sometimes? Because like your generations, you give me a free spirit, you give me an old soul, someone that's been here before, and returning and just living a very carefree life. And I love it because I feel like, less is more and it always will be. But like, how do you navigate the ups and downs and like the conflict that may arise? Like, how do you guys get through it? It just seems beautiful. Like, even the argument, I mean, you can only argue about so much on a boat and you're
Yeah.
right in front of each other all the time. So like, how is it when you need space from each other? One of you can just go inland and just take a walk, and like, what do you do for you?
Oh, that is a really good question. Yeah, it is. So with an age gap relationship, I would completely understand like assumptions, which can be very true, that it's hard to find common ground. And I think in some relationships that is the case, and that doesn't necessarily mean that it's not going to work. But Tim is just, I mean, we are very different people, of course. We come from completely different childhoods, and he's been on the earth a lot longer, but I personally find that really fucking interesting, because there are endless stories. Like, I've known him for 3 years now, and there are still stories that I hear him tell, and I'm like, wow, I never knew that about you. Like, I never knew that you experienced that. And I just find it very cool. And yeah, of course, there are some things that I, nag and tease him on, some old beliefs that maybe, I didn't grow up with. And I'm like, hey, couldn't that be a little different? And he is extremely open-minded. And yeah, but there are things about living on a boat that are really challenging, space being one. And when we lived on our sailboat, it's just one big room. The only door was on the bathroom. But if you're in bed, I see you there. If you're on the couch, I see you there. If you're in the kitchen, you're 2 feet away from me all the time.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I would just take a walk a lot of the times. And, if things, if we needed a little bit of space, which everyone does, and I'm personally a very introverted person a lot of the time, and I need space. Yeah, but the cool thing about it is that we, we would we were at a marina for a year, and I would just walk up and down the dock, and it's very easy in that space to reset. Whereas I feel like now that we're in a home, because we've been in between boats, it's kind of like it's not as easy to stay connected all the time. Like if he's downstairs working, I don't see him for 8 or 9 hours in the day. And then I'm like, oh, I actually don't know what you experienced today. That's a little weird because I'm used to always being up to speed, whether I like it or not. But yeah, yeah, with our age gap, there have been, things that have come up, but I honestly feel like any two people in a relationship have things that come up because no two of us are completely alike. We always have different ways that we like to be loved, different ways that we argue, different ways that we do everything, and different ways of thinking. So to me, it hasn't been as much about the age, as much as it's been about like mastering myself and trying to have the patience with myself so that I can look at Tim and say, okay, let me try to put myself in your position right now. And, and I think the more that we learn about each other, you would think like after knowing someone for 3 years, you would know them pretty well. But to me, there are things that I'm learning every single day about like, oh, this is the way that you react in this situation. And I think it's so beautiful to look at couples who have been together for a decade or 2 decades or even longer, and just how well they bounce off of each other and they know how to get each other out of certain moods, or, I think that's really, really cool.
Right.
So when you both started dating, like the people around you, was there like ever like an issue with the like your loved ones because of like the whole age thing, or were everyone pretty receptive around you?
I would say generally most people were very receptive to
Like,
us. However, Tim's mom, the first thing that she asked when he said that he was dating someone was, how old is she? And when he said 20, which is very young, and I completely understand because it's very unconventional, she just said, well, don't get her pregnant. And like did not expect it to last at all, which
yeah.
I also understand. He has children that are my age. You
Uh,
know, people have a hard time with that. But when we're out in the world and we're together, it's very obvious. Like we're both of our love language is physical touch, so we're always like holding hands, or he has his arm around me, or you can tell that we're in a relationship. You can tell he's not my dad. You
Yeah.
know, there's been one time where he's been mistaken for my dad, which was hilarious. But other than that, like I feel like when people meet us together, they don't even ask about the age gap because it's just very clear that we're together and that we love each other. And so it hasn't been as much of an issue, but with our families, it was hard for them to digest at first.
How was it for his like kids and you? Because like you're looking at people, you're like face to face with people that are your age, and you're like, yeah, I'm with your dad. So like, yeah, that's cool. Like, what is it for you? How was that situation for you?
I almost pissed myself. Um, when I met his son,
Mhm.
it was different from meeting his daughter for me. Because of just like the differences in energy. Like when I met his son is very like inward, like go with the flow, you know. And so we got to kind of meet each other a little bit more slowly. Whereas like with his daughter, I don't know why, I felt a lot more pressure, like is she going to judge me or like what is she going to say? And she is very outspoken. So I feel like if she did feel uncomfortable, hopefully she would have said something. But yeah, it's just been a slow moving process. I feel like honestly, I am more nervous than they are, or I at least was in the beginning. I'm not anymore. When we spend time together, it's just like friends. It's not like, and I think in in one way, like it is really nerve-wracking for me because I'm like, oh, these people, like if my dad came around dating a 20-year-old, I'd be like, fuck off, you know, like I'd be like, oh, I'm gonna have to really evaluate this situation. Um,
Why do you
so I
think that is?
completely, sorry.
Why do you think that is? Sorry to cut you off.
Oh, well, my dad's just a very different person from Tim. You know, I feel like people, because Tim has a very youthful energy. He was in a punk rock band in the 90s. He was very,
Mm.
you know, he went hitchhiking. He just had a very, he's always been a very youthful energy. And, you know, even to this day, like he wants to live on a boat and like travel the world. He's not like your average, you know, 56-year-old, whereas my dad is probably your average 65-year-old. You know what I mean? It's a different thing. Because they're just different people. So I feel like, you know, but I understand his kids probably were like, oh, I don't know about this. But I'm really grateful that they didn't judge the situation until they met me. And yeah, I feel like I've been more uh nervous than they have been. And in a way, like they've had, you know, because obviously Tim is divorced and they had a little bit of trauma around like their dad, you know, being with a woman, obviously, because it hadn't worked out before. And now that I'm in the picture, I don't feel like they feel like, oh, I'm gonna have to accept this person as like any sort of mother figure because I'm their age. And so I will never be like a stepmom to them. And they were both adults by the time that I met them. And so it's like I don't have that pressure and they don't have that pressure that we have our relationship has to look any sort of way. So we're just friends. And, you know, if we got married, then legally I'd be like their stepmother, but it would never actually look that way.
Right.
Oh my gosh. So like is like marriage like a thing in your head? Or are you just one of those, couples that are just like, cool, we're together, we know what it is. That's just is what it is. But if marriage comes along, then it's like, okay, cool. Is that how you go about it? Or do you
That's how that's how I was thinking in the beginning. But now I definitely have a Pinterest board of like beach elopement ceremonies that I think would be cool to play out. Not because I necessarily need the label, but I don't know. I feel like um, my views have sort of changed on it. Just, I guess now that I know that I can trust someone and that I can rely on someone for, you know, the rest of my life or the rest of his life, whichever comes first. Um, yeah, it's coming into my head more and more. So we'll see.
beautiful?
So
So what do you
go ahead.
I'm sorry, Ellie. So what are your hobbies? Like what do you like to do whenever you have free time? Because I know you mentioned he'll be downstairs working for a few hours, or like what do you like to do when you have like free time?
Oh, many things. Um, the past year and a half or so, it's been boat work, which has been a lot of like teaching myself how to like paint a boat and like make a new couch for a boat. And I love to sew. I grew up sewing with my grandmother, and so thankfully I had some of those very minimal skills to sort of pass along, which there's more sewing and living on a sailboat than in many other things. I mean, I guess if you sew for a living, that's a different thing, but I did a lot of sewing projects. But day to day, like I love going to the beach. I love uh, hanging out with people, hanging out with friends. I love cooking and baking. Yeah, I guess the past year or so that I've been not working anymore, I am a